Why, hello there, and welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I'm a member of the the Boston Online Film Critics Association? That's it. Yeah, that one.
That one. Yep. My name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. Co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of It's the Pictures podcast.
And my name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Galaga, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
Salute. Before I get into the the brass tacks of the show, you know why I fumbled that? Because I was thinking, I don't know where this came from. I was about to say Charlotte, as in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I don't know why. I think that maybe I'm just getting older, like we were talking about off mic. So anyway, we got movies to talk about tonight. But before we get into the two movies we're going to be talking about, which will take place very shortly over on Patreon, in honor of its 35th anniversary and 4K release, we talk about James Cameron's The Abyss. We had one first timer and two many timers checking in, and there is some debate over whether the special edition is better than the theatrical edition version. You know what I mean? So check that out if you're a patron, and if you're not, maybe you could consider becoming one. That would be very cool. We do bonus episodes every week. While I'm here, by the way, let's thank our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
And this week we're talking about Civil War and The Greatest Hits, which doesn't sound like a movie title, but it is a movie title. Yeah.
It is.
Civil
It
War.
is, indeed.
Megan and I saw that. This is Alex Garland's latest. And here is the IMDb summary. Oh, the word dystopian's right in there in the front, Megan. Ooh. A journey across a dystopian future America, following a team of military-embedded journalists as they race against time to reach D.C., as in Washington, D.C., before rebel factions descend upon the White House. Well, that's misleading.
I actually don't think it is, but okay.
Are they trying to get there before the rebel? Do they ever make that clear?
Yes, they are. Yes,
I
they
know.
do. They say that right in the beginning.
So this is written and directed by Alex Garland.
Because they want to interview the president before.
Well, that part I remember. They want to interview the president, but
right, but they're trying to beat. Anyway,
got it.
Continue.
Okay. This movie stars Kirsten Dunst, Kaylee Spiney. I don't know. It's an AE
Spaney.
name.
It's either Spaney or Spanny.
Yeah, and it's about this reporter who's played by Wagner Moura. His name's Joel. Kirsten Dunst is the photographer. Kaylee is the new photographer, wants to be a wartime photographer like Kirsten Dunst. And the United States has fallen into civil war. There is a president played by Nick Offerman, the first bad choice in this movie. Megan's eyes just came out of her head.
Well, because there are a lot of bad choices in this movie, and I don't think that's one of them.
Well, you know what? I'll explain what I mean. I feel like every time I see Nick Offerman, I'm just prepared for kind of restrained silliness, if that makes sense. And then when you hold on.
No.
And then when you kind of get into it and let him do his thing, then you can see him like grow the character, and you're like, oh, this is actually very different from what he did before, and he's really good. Like in the zombie,
The Last of Us.
Thank you. How can I not remember the name of The Last of Us? One of my favorite games ever. Jesus, fuck is happening to me? So, and I just feel like if there were more time to develop that, then I would have taken him more seriously in that role.
That's totally fair. I understand what you're saying now.
So anyway, yeah, Kirsten Dunst and Wagner Moura, Lee and Joel are trying to get to Washington, D.C. to interview the president, who is Nick Offerman, and they are joined by Kaylee Spiney, who's the newbie, and then this character actor who's great, and he's in everything, and I don't know his name.
Stephen McKinley Henderson.
Thank you, Stephen McKinley Henderson. He's
You're
so
welcome.
good. Such a great character actor.
He is so good, always.
And he plays an old school reporter who, has trouble with mobility, but he hitches a ride with them because he wants to go to Charlottesville, Virginia. And so the movie is just their journey from New York to Washington, D.C., and the different factions of, I guess, what do we call them? Rebels? I don't know. Fighting against the United States Army. You've got the California group, the Texas faction, the Florida Patriots.
No, they're one faction.
Well, right.
One.
But here's my question. How did they come together? How did Texas and California come together?
So I have a quick comment because I've seen that comment all over the place.
Okay.
And I heard this on, I can't think of the, W. Kamau Bell. He said it, funny enough, not in relation to Civil War, but he's like, California is basically Texas with gay people.
Oh, interesting.
So I have zero idea if that's true. Not from California, not from Texas. But I think his point is that there are a lot of pockets of conservatism in California. That's, if you want to look at it rationally, I think Alex Garland's perspective is, well, things were so shitty that they banded together, because I've seen that explanation in the production notes and in interviews that he's given.
And those are the two most populous states, right? So
yes,
you got a lot of people who could form militias. Well, this is the thing that's kind of interesting. This movie has no backstory. There is no backstory to anything. The only backstory you get is a little bit of Kirsten Dunst. You get like 3 or 4 set pieces very quickly of her in different war zones photographing different wars, like the Rwandan genocide, and then I can't remember the other ones. But she's grizzled, and I think her expression doesn't change much in this movie. I think it's just the story about them going to DC and, almost dying several times on their way. And like I said, there's no backstory. The only thing is that Nick Offerman's president stayed for a 3rd term, which is apparently the catalyst for the Civil War. And so I think a major problem with this movie, I didn't like it. A major problem with this movie is that if you're watching it like today, the day it comes out, you think, oh, 3rd term. Well, this is Donald Trump and, blah, 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 blah. But if you're watching this, assuming there's still a country in 25 years and like, what the fuck is this? I don't get it. I just think, this movie is like, I have such a problem with Alex Garland. Just that everything devolves into fucking violence at the end of his movies, except Annihilation, which is all violence until the end. And then it's just like 2 people looking at each other going, are you an alien? Are you an alien? Megan, what did you think of Civil War?
Brilliant.
Huh?
Annihilation is brilliant. I love it.
I like Annihilation a lot. He didn't write the source material. Maybe that's got something to do with it.
Oh, I know. Jeff Vandermeer did. And I love those books too. They're beautiful and amazing.
So that was the 10-cent tour. Megan, you said there are a lot of things wrong with this when I mentioned I didn't like Nick Offerman's thing, but I get the feeling maybe you didn't dislike it.
I think there are a lot of things that work, and I think there are a lot of things that don't work. I think this is, somebody asked me my thoughts as I was exiting after we went to the press screening, and I said, I feel like I want to vomit. And I was not being hyperbolic. I was not being metaphorical. Like, I really wanted to vomit. And you and I kind of texted about the noise level, which makes us sound like old. But seriously, it's so fucking loud. It's so loud. I felt like I was being assaulted by all my senses, in every sense of the word, like visually, audio wise. I was on edge.
Loud.
It's so loud. And it's an IMAX, so of course it's loud, but it's loud anyway. But I was on edge the entire time. I was constantly tensed, constantly on edge, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my God. And I don't just mean from the sense of like, oh, this is riveting, although I was captivated by it for better or for worse, because it's fucking horrifying. It's so brutal and it's so disturbing and just visceral and really a horrifying dystopia. I think there's a lot to dig into, because there's been a lot of conversation leading up to the film, and now that there have been some screenings, there's a lot more conversation, and I think this is going to elicit even more conversation now that it's officially out. Because I kept thinking, like, are these images horrifying because they're happening in the US? Or are they horrifying because they're horrifying? Because, I mean, at one point in the montage of violence that we see a black man set on fire.
Right.
We see people's bloody bodies hanging. We see people shot in the streets. We see a suicide bomber and people blown up in an explosion.
That's in the first 10 minutes, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And not to mention at the end of the film, when we see DC bombed by the other factions and we see the White House sacked, essentially, which felt even more disturbing considering January 6th and just felt really chilling. But yeah, I mean, I think the things that work are Kirsten Dunst is phenomenal. I love her in anything and everything. And I think it's interesting what you said, Dave, about how her expression never changes, because you're right. Her expression doesn't change, but yet I think she is such a great actor that even though on the surface it doesn't look like it changes, I think she's so weary and just burned out that it works for me. I love Kaylee Spaney. I think she's an excellent actor too. She's great in Priscilla. She's great in The Craft Legacy. I think she's good here. I have never liked Wagner Moura ever. I don't like him in movies. I don't like him on Narcos. I think he's excellent here. Like, I was really pleasantly surprised with his performance. Jesse Plemons makes a cameo, and it's one of the most fucking chilling
creepy.
cameos
That
I've
was genuinely
ever
creepy.
seen. Yeah, but here's the thing. If you've you haven't watched Breaking Bad. If you've ever watched Breaking Bad, you know Jesse Plemons can do unhinged like nobody's business.
Yeah, chilling
and
unhinged.
Yeah. Well, think of that, Evan, and that's how he is here, ramped up, if you can believe it. Like,
that's
it is
frightening.
So terrifying. And he's great. So I think the cinematography is really good. I think the pacing is good. Like, I think there are a lot of great elements here. I think what's dubious is some of the behind the scenes things and the dialogue. So there's a really interesting line where Jessie is the younger journalist, photojournalist, is really having a problem with the fact that she didn't intercede in people being hung and then they were shot. And Lee, Kirsten Dunst's character, says, once you start asking yourself those questions, you can't stop. So we don't ask. We record so other people ask. Want to be a journalist? That's the job. That's fucking bullshit. I'm sorry, but that's absolute bullshit. I understand the notion that you think that, like, oh, you need unbiased reporters and reporting. I get that stance, but nobody is unbiased. Everybody's coming to the table with their own biases and their own perspectives, even in photojournalism, even in combat photography. And it really reminded me of Lucy Lawless's new documentary about Margaret Moth, a CNN war photojournalist from New Zealand. And she very intentionally talked about how she didn't shy away from, and she chose to show the impact of war on civilians. And she made intentional choices about her photography. And so if you're really telling me that a photographer and a journalist is just like, nope, I'm just recording the facts, like, that's ridiculous. But then the film kind of undoes that thought too, because later in the film, she's talking and she says, every time I survived a war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this, but here we are. So to me, it's very clear that the film is an anti-war film, which is great. But it very clearly wants to laud journalists, which is also amazing. And I would argue that journalists are the bedrock of democracy. But I think there's a lot of, just like I said, I think dubious is the word I keep throwing around about this film, because that's how I feel. And I feel like like things don't quite make sense. And the fact that Alex Garland has done so many interviews explaining his perspective and getting pissed off at people calling out his kind of supposed apolitical message, the fact that you never learn whether people are progressive or if they're Republican or anything, because he wanted to remove that and he just wanted to kind of show what was happening. And I think you really lay your politics out on the line when in the final credits, you are thanking a racist transphobe And you're also thanking someone who is a fascist Nazi where you got archival footage from them. I think that's very suspicious.
I didn't see that. What?
Yep. It's the very last scene, like the last shot of the credits where it says, "We would like to thank." And yep, Helen Lewis, who is a racist transphobe journalist, and Andy Ngo, who is a right winger. Yep. So, and there's another person too. I don't want to get the name wrong, so I'm not going to say, but there's another person too who is, I believe, also a right winger as well, that they got archival footage from, and they're anti-Antifa. And the fact that in the movie there's a line about the Antifa massacre, and at first I was like, that's weird, but I'm thinking like, well, this is a dystopian film, so maybe we're playing fast and loose with facts here, but I don't think that's the case. So I'm like, there's just some weird fucking decisions in this movie.
Well, one thing that this movie has in common with all of his movies except Annihilation is that it devolves into violence, like extreme violence, in the last 20 minutes. Yeah. I mean, 28 Days Later. What's the one about going to the sun? Sunshine. There's one that I'm forgetting. Right, The Beach. The Beach. Did he do that?
He wrote it. I think Danny Boyle directed it.
Right. And there's another one. Oh, Ex Machina.
You mentioned.
Just all now. Ex Machina. It kind of makes sense to me, although I still don't.
Yeah, to me too.
I still don't think it is a great ending.
I think it's a great ending.
Yeah.
That's for another time to debate.
Well, I think I'll just say this briefly. I think it's not a great ending because the movie that comes before it I find so distasteful that I'm just like, by the time the ending comes around, I'm like, I don't give a shit. Just anyway. I think it's safe to say I'm not an Alex Garland fan, except for most of 28 Days Later. But and Sunshine. I like Sunshine, most of it. But this, I knew I was in trouble the moment I saw the suicide bomber getting ready, because I was just thinking, we don't need, because okay, we're in New York. She's a suicide bomber. Mm-hmm. We don't need to see that. We just need to see the next time you see her when she runs past Kirsten Dunst, and Kirsten Dunst grabs Lee, grabs Jesse and brings her behind this police car that they're next to. That's what you need to see. You don't need, it's just a poor choice. Because now we've seen the suicide bomber getting ready. Now we know it's going to happen. I don't want to know that that's going to happen. Why would you not surprise me with that? And I agree with you about the dialogue. Some of the dialogue is just like, it makes me feel like he didn't talk to a lot of reporters, but I'm sure he did. He being Alex Garland. But also just some of the plot threads were so horrendously predictable. Like, I didn't know that there's this scene when Lee and Jesse and Joel and I can't remember his character. First, Sammy, Stephen McKinley Henderson.
Sammy.
They're in their car and they're traveling somewhere. They're trying to get to DC. And then this other SUV is like pulling up behind them at like incredible speed. And I thought that was going to be some kind of like tense scene. And it turns out it's two other reporters who are just being like, who know Joel. And he told them they were going to DC. And so they're like kind of trying to ride his coattails or get there before him if they can. And they end up doing this crazy thing where one of the guys from the other car jumps into theirs. And then Jesse jumps into the other car. And then Jesse and the guy who I think is also a photojournalist in the second car.
Yep.
The car disappears and Joel and Lee are like, where the fuck did their car go? And then they come upon it with the doors open. And I was like, well, we know where this is going. And that's the Jesse Plemons scene, which in its defense is a good scene. I mean,
it's a great scene,
but the way it ends,
really
so like we were saying, Sammy, Stephen McKinley Henderson, can't walk well. He uses a cane. and they make constant jokes about him being old. And by the way, by the time the fourth one rolls around, it's like, we get it. He's old. Move on. You've made your point. I'm not going to forget. Also the gray hair. There's that too. But when they're standing there and they're deciding, all right, we have to go get Jesse and the other guy, and Kirsten Dunst, or Joel and Lee, and then the other reporter from the second car, who's now in the first, whatever. The three of them go over, and I'm just like, and Sammy's like, don't go. And they're like, well, then stay here, Sammy. You can't walk. Just stay here. And I'm like, if this scene ends with Sammy saving them somehow, I'm going to be fucking furious. And then that's how it ends. He drives in and runs over Jesse Plemons and there's three militia guys there. Runs over Jesse Plemons and some other dude. Not before the two Chinese reporters get killed by Jesse Plemons. I forgot to mention these guys are Chinese. And who speak English like fluently, no, unaccented English. It's not like, it's just this scene about, I think the idea being like, this civil war is just crazy enough that you just don't know what you're going to run into. And it just so happens they run into psycho, right-wing, racist militia guys who don't give a shit that they're reporters. Because Jesse Plemons keeps saying to Joel, well, we're American. Are you American? You from Central America? South America?
Right.
And
what kind of American are you?
And then Joel like quickly picks up what they're asking, and he says Florida. And he has an accent.
He does.
And so, but for some reason that satisfies Jesse Plemons, or at least in the moment it does.
Or the plot armor.
Right. And so Sammy runs them down, and it's just like, I really hate this. And then I was like, by the way, so the one guy who survives starts shooting at their SUV as it's driving away. And then I thought, if Sammy gets shot in this and then dies, I'm going to be fucking furious. And then Sammy gets shot and dies. And it's like,
and you're more furious.
What the fuck is this? Why can I guess every beat that's coming in this movie? It's so stupid. These choices are so stupid. It's fucking like Adventure Story 101. You may as well have the protagonist who's going to die see a beautiful sunset and then a beautiful sunrise the next morning. Like, what the fuck? You know? Christ, that's bad. I just, Alex Garland obviously thinks that he has taken the time to like set up this dystopian future where you're not sure what's going on, and then he just bogs it down with all this horse shit. And by the way, I also knew that Kirsten Dunst was going to die because
that was
because I was just like, this movie's just stupid enough that they're going to kill the protagonist. And then they do. And then Jesse has to go and get the shot of the president being shot to death by the militia.
Oh, but don't forget beforehand, an earlier conversation that Jesse and Lee have where Lee's like, I don't want you here because I know this is not going to end well for you and you're going to get killed or you're going to get somebody else killed. Like, and she's like, and then Jesse's like, if I die, will you take my photo? And Lee never answers. And then Jesse is taking Lee's photo as she's dying.
Yeah. It's so awful,
Evan.
Evan.
On the nose.
It's just like,
God.
Yeah, I don't think it's so awful the way you do. Although I knew watching this, I was like, oh, Dave's gonna hate this. Like I knew it. I knew it because it's so predictable, And you know that doesn't usually bother me. Although it did bother me here because the whole point is that everything's supposed to be so chaotic and you don't know who's a live wire and you don't know what they're gonna do, but yet it's also predictable. So I don't know. So I think it's interesting because Alex Garland like wrote this like 4 years ago. Like, so he's been working on this. It's not like he just like, slapdash this together.
Did he write it in response to January 6th?
I don't think he has said. He talked about a lot of things. He said a lot of things caused him anxiety and anger, and those things and he channeled those into this script, and it just grew. His anger and anxiety, but part of it was COVID. Probably part of it was Donald Trump. Not that I read a ton of interviews and I didn't see him say anything specifically. He's been kind of cagey about politics, other than talking about recently he said something about growing up in a punk ex-hippie background, which is probably the closest he has revealed about his politics recently in regards to this film. Because I think he keeps saying he's very particular in the choice of words he uses and his answers, because he doesn't want to have anyone have preconceived notions going in. He doesn't seem to want to alienate anyone, which is why there is no backstory really, because he wants to open up a conversation rather than lecture people.
And there needs to be a backstory in this fucking movie.
See, I don't actually agree with that. I'm okay with there not being a backstory per se, but with a big caveat, if you're not going to have a backstory, you need to have some consistency. And unfortunately, there's just not. I don't think there is. I think in his mind, it's very clear, like, well, everything just needs to be respectable and we need journalists and this is and war is terrible. And those things are all true. I agree with that ethos tremendously. But I think the way he gets from point A to point B just feels muddled. It feels convoluted. It feels
I was going to say hackneyed,
icky, for lack of a better word. Hackneyed is a great word. It's a great word. Yeah, but I like this more than you because I think there are elements that work. I think there's strong performances, and I think the visuals are great.
I think the first
visceral.
The first battle where we see them embedded, where it's just guys in like regular clothing, and then the one guy gets shot through the side and he's bleeding, and Jesse takes that photo. I think that's a good scene. Also, when you hear the wounded U.S. Army soldier like upstairs, like crying.
Oh my God.
And it gets louder when they're going up the stairs. And I'm just like, this poor son of a bitch.
Yeah.
At least they just shoot him and put him out of his misery immediately. But then they execute 3 other soldiers. Like they put, the bags over their heads and everything.
Right. And take them out and shoot them.
But the other thing that's, the other thing that's,
it is.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about this though, is the final battle when they're in Washington, D.C., whatever that militia is really, really put together. Like they're not just some ragtag group of people like the Jesse Plemons peeps or those other guys that we ran across earlier, those guys that were wearing their own clothes clearly knew what they were doing because.
Oh, you mean the gas station?
No, not the gas station. Before that,
oh, okay.
When the guy gets shot in the side and.
Oh, yes. Right. You're right. They're wearing their own clothes. They're not wearing military uniforms. The way the people at the Capitol are.
But the people at the Capitol, the whatever, I'm just going to keep using the word militia, whatever militia that is, they're clearly like ex-soldiers or something because they are all wearing fatigues. They've got the tactical gear. They have the communications gear. They're not, there's no crossfire that they're like, accidentally running into. So I don't know. It's just that is one of the things I thought was interesting, the contrast between that group and then, the groups that you see, let's just call it the wilderness for lack of a better term. I do think that there are things about this that worked. I didn't love Kirsten Dunst's performance the way you did. I loved her face. I thought her face always looked right. And talking about the subtlety. And there are a few times when she cracks a smile because she's basically smiling at what a dope Jesse is. Not entirely, but.
No, but she's got naivete, she's young and she's eager and hungry to do more.
But
she doesn't have the world weariness and wisdom that Lee has.
But I didn't love the way she read some of her lines, but I think that's because the lines themselves were not good.
Yeah, I agree. Although I also wonder, like some of the lines that I had issues with, I'm like, is that the point? Like, is Lee putting on this persona so she's supposed to sound like it's supposed to sound clunky? I don't know. I don't know if it's an intentional choice or not.
Anyway, that's where I come down. I think I've made it clear how I feel.
Yeah, like I said, I think there are some unethical decisions or dubious ethical decisions made behind the scenes that I think are rather distasteful, to say the least. And I think that's strange, considering I think it's strange that you wouldn't know who you're getting footage from or who you're working with, considering you're making a political movie and considering that, because I've seen this critique, and Alex Garland has commented on this critique that the movie is apolitical and doesn't have anything to say. And I don't agree with that, actually. I think there are elements that are apolitical, but I don't think it is overall. But it's very clear that he has a perspective, because the whole point that he points out is that the president disbanded the FBI, and the president reinstated himself for a third term. So he's a fascist, essentially. He calls him that. And Alex Garland, I mean, not in the film. So, how do you take out a fascist? How do you, take back democracy, I guess? And his, another point that he said was that he wanted to show that, like, the US, as powerful as it is and influential as it is, no country is immune from failure or from, falling apart. And that's fair. I think, interestingly, considering Alex Garland is a writer, and I have really loved some of his work. I love Ex Machina. I love Annihilation, even though, like you said earlier, he did not write that, but he did write the screenplay, I believe. But I think the writing has a lot of issues. So, but great performances, really stunning visuals. I think there are a lot of elements that work and ones that don't.
I liked Dredd. I know that he had a hand in that.
Dredd's great. Great.
Okay. Yep. Well, do you have any final statements? That sounds like a good concluding moment from you.
Yeah, I could say more. The one thing I will say is I think there's a lot to unpack with this film.
There is a lot
to process. So, yeah, I mean, I think we could keep having conversations about this. It's one I haven't been able to stop thinking about, because there's a lot works, some, that doesn't, but I think that's a good spot to stop.
I will mention real quick, when we also got asked what we thought of the movie, and I was with one of our friends who has been a guest on the show, but I didn't ask her whether I could use her name, so I'm not going to. But they asked her what she thought, and she said, they could have tried harder. That was her answer. So anyway, I'll leave you with that. Okay. Next movie on the list tonight is The Greatest Hits, which, the more I say it, the more I'm like, that's a weird title for a movie. This is written and directed by Ned Benson. This stars Lucy Boynton and Justin H. Min. And Nelly Furtado shows up as herself.
Yeah, she
and
did.
Her most famous song, of course, is featured rather prominently in this. And so let me read you our faithful IMDb summary. A love story centering on the connection between music and memory and how they transport us, sometimes literally. Yeah, I guess that's vague enough, but it's also true. So Lucy Boynton is this woman. Her name's Harriet. She and her boyfriend were in a horrific car accident, and he died, and she had a traumatic brain injury. And as the result of the traumatic brain injury, which she has more or less recovered from, except for this one thing, whenever she hears a song that they had in common from a particular moment in their lives, she goes back into the past, into that moment. And so she's been spending the last 2 years since his death, A, recovering, but B, also trying to convince him not to go buy this chair that he wanted to buy, because they were driving to get this chair, and that's when they were in the car accident. She can't convince him. She goes to this support group, this grief support group, 2-year anniversary. And then Justin Min is David. He shows up in a really irritating, cute kind of knock over the chairs way. I didn't, that's the only thing I'm going to say about that. And then I think he trips again on the way out. I don't remember. She trips. She trips. And then
because nothing says a woman is relatable like her tripping.
And then they sort of,
from Jennifer Lawrence,
right?
They start to have a relationship, and he has lost it. Justin Min has lost his parents, one after the other, one from an illness, and then one from a sudden, I guess, heart episode. I don't know if he said it. Died in
their sleep. I think his dad died.
Theorizes that his dad died of a broken heart, which does happen. So, and it turns out, of course, that his parents owned the antique shop where Harriet's boyfriend, his name is Max, was going to buy the chair. So she'd actually bumped into David once before, although they didn't speak. And then at some point when they're like sort of starting this relationship, she decides she's got to tell David that she can go into the past. And he's like, that's weird. And then she convinces him. And then she says to Max, in one of her I went backwards things, I'm going to, like, what if I could, like, if I had a chance to, like, if you were in danger and I had a chance to save your life, would you want me to do that? Or would you want to, live? And he's like, I wouldn't want to live if I couldn't have you. Cause she says we wouldn't know each other. And, so she goes back to the time when they first met, which they had a meet cute at a festival. He's a musician, I guess. You never get to hear his music, thank God, because apparently he's a bad musician. And the first time you see the scene, it's like them falling in love, and she's like, "This is I just met the love of my life. Oh, that's crazy." And then the second time she goes back, she's like, "I'm gonna let the love of my life go," and she doesn't go with him and doesn't meet him, and she bumps into him years later accidentally in a coffee. Actually, bumps into his dog. She doesn't even really see him, and then she bumps into David at a concert. They end up standing next to each other at a. I mean, you can call it Roxy Music. It's Brian Ferry concert. Because Brian Ferry is a thing that they have, whatever. It's a thing that they have in common, a love of Brian Ferry and this particular remix album, which I think that David's just really using to get to know her, although he does like Roxy Music. Anyway, what did we think of the greatest hits? Evan, what did you think of the greatest hits?
I liked it.
But you didn't love it?
The end. No, I liked it a lot, actually. I mean, I'm a sucker for romance and time travel, and I mean, I like some of the choices in this movie. Like, in the beginning, I like that they play. God, what's the name of that song? This is the day.
It's not the version, but it is that song.
Yeah. There's a couple of times. Well, Empire Records is a movie that I love. It's a guilty pleasure movie, and they kind of reference it twice in this movie between playing that song and then there's a scene later on where they're trying to like fundraise to save a record store. So I was a big fan of that, but I liked that they took that song, which in Empire Records has this very like hopeful feeling. It's like, oh, everyone's like, we saved the record store. All everything is gonna be great. And then in this, like, she's hearing it when they get into the car accident, and then like the lyrics take on a different like somber, sad quality of like, oh no, this is the day where everything like changed, but in a horrible, horrible way. So I like that choice. I liked how the time travel worked, where it was like she would hear the song and like her body would basically like stay in place, and it looked like she was having possibly like a seizure or like passed out. And then she'd be like sucked into the past and then able to just be there long enough to hear the song in its duration. Then like once the song stopped, then she'd like get jerked back into the present, or like she could stop the song herself. And I like that the movie like lets you wait a little while to like confirm whether she's actually going back in time or it's like all in her head when she gets to like leave that note.
Right.
In the desk at the parents' antique store. And I found Justin H-Man a lot more charming in this than he was in that Randall Park movie, Shortcomings.
Yeah.
He played such a D-bag.
I tell you, I had a little Shortcomings hangover, because when he showed up on screen, I'm like, oh, this guy.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm rewatching Beef right now, and he's in that, and I had forgotten he was in that too. Like, oh my god, this guy's everywhere right now. But I liked him in this. I mean, I think he had to toe a line between being kind of sweet and nice and understanding, but also like a real person. That's like, you hear someone saying to you, I can travel through time, and even if you like that person, you're probably going to at least be a little bit skeptical.
Yeah. He's definitely incredulous, but he's not a jerk about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I like that about him, his character. And what was I going to say also about that? Oh, and like he is quick to kind of admit like, this is a lot. You know, like this is a lot to think about, and it's a lot to compete with. Like if you're dating someone and they're so hung up on their ex, whether they're, you know, even though he's dead, it's like she's traveling back in time all the time. He's on her mind all the time. She's got the friggin' like timeline of their relationship with like one of those like, there's no red strings, thankfully, but there might as well be.
Yeah, I keep thinking of that shot of the meme of Charlie Day, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I think he's believable, and that like he needs to take a step back and think about whether he wants to go forward with it. And I like that she kind of calls him back, and they have that like nice moment on the bench in the park, which I thought was also framed really well. Yeah, I was into it. I also really like the drag party that they went to, that like outdoor dance party that was cool. And then I like that because she's like wearing headphones all the time and she has like the earplugs in, so she doesn't like accidentally like hear a song and then get like knocked out while she's like driving a car or in some compromising place. He takes her to that rooftop dance party where everyone's kind of rocking out to their own music on headphones. I thought that was a really sweet idea.
Silent disco. Gotta love it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was a fan of this, although I was, you know, it is heartbreaking that the universe is like, oh, your boyfriend's gone. Oh, you can see him, but you can't like prevent his death. And then like the only way to like completely like unhook yourself from this is to go back in time and just never have a relationship with him. I just thought that was like so tragic that had to be the answer to it. But I'm glad at least that she crossed paths with David again at the end of the movie.
Megan.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. This made me cry a lot throughout almost the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you too, Evan.
It made me. Yeah, I wasn't crying, but I was
news for you two.
Wow. Well,
I'm just, you know, hey, future spoiler. No.
Do you want to take it away? Yeah, I found this really, really charming and very bittersweet. I like you, Evan. I also love a time travel story. And I said this before you guys off mic. I love that it has a woman protagonist because so few time travelers are actually women, which is great. I really like the exploration of memory and music and its ability to transport us, usually metaphorically, but here literally. I like that I like that it's a very quick flash, but the book she's holding is Oliver Sacks's Musicophilia, which Ned Benson was inspired by, which the book focuses on the intersection of neurology and music and how music can impact people with certain illnesses and conditions. And I also really like how the film is an allegory for how our pasts can haunt us and how we can't really like move on because we're still tethered to the past. I really, really appreciated that. And a lot of that I think was really emotionally resonant. And I really liked Justin H. Min in this too. I love him in After Yang. I think he's lovely in that, but he is insufferable in Shortcomings. So I was uh-oh. I was like, which one am I going to get? Am I going to get the After Yang one or the Shortcomings? And I was very pleasantly surprised that I found him really delightful here. And I liked his rapport with Lucy Boynton. I think they have a nice chemistry. I wish she didn't undo the past. And I don't just mean because it's tragic, because it is. But I kind of wish there had been another solution, or she just kind of dealt with it, because I feel like our grief is what shapes us and it's what makes us who we are. And you can't really fix things. You can't really fix things easily. So even though I completely understand, obviously she wanted to save her boyfriend's life, even if it meant sacrificing them knowing each other and their relationship, I still kind of wish somehow she still had like if she had the knowledge, like she changed the past, but she still had the knowledge, but it didn't seem like she still had the knowledge. It seemed like it was like a clean Yeah, it was like a clean slate. Yeah. So I kind of
the dog knew her though.
Right? Yeah, the dog knew her. The dog knew her.
The dog definitely remembered.
Yes, the dog knew her. But yeah, so if she had like sacrificed but still had the knowledge. I don't know. I think I would have liked it a bit more. But other than that, I think it was
Okay.
lovely. Okay, Dave.
No,
Tell us
you two are
all.
going to be surprised. I did not shed a tear during this. And I cry at every movie. Every movie. Well, except the horror movies. Although I cry at some of those too.
Every movie.
Yeah, this is I think I found myself I think this works more for me on an intellectual. It was a dumb thing to say about like a romance time travel movie. But this works more for me on an intellectual level than it does an emotional level. I think that Lucy Boynton is very good. I think that Justin H. Min's character is a little thin. I think David's a little thin. I think Max is really thin.
That's fair.
Yeah, if I have a critique, it would be that Max is, I think, a little too thin, and that we're not really. I don't know. I feel like there's not a compelling enough.
Well, here's the thing. I think perhaps that I don't think that probably Ned Benson thinks that Max is a thin character, but I think that you could make the inference that part of the reason she saves Max's life and doesn't have the relationship with him is because on some level she knows her relationship with David will eventually be deeper. Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Because, you
I
know,
buy that.
And I think the way that was confirmed for me is when she runs into Max in the coffee shop, she doesn't really see him at all. He's with another woman. Their dogs see each other. And she pats his dog, and like you said, the dog knows her, or the dog's like, "Why do I know you?" or whatever the dog does. And then she goes to the Roxy Music concert, and David ends up right next to her, and they bump shoulders, and they're kind of like looking at each other with like doe eyes. And it's like, oh, well, these two are going to end up together. And I think, you know, in a different movie, I don't know how Ned Benson could have kept Max and Harriet together and not had it be a total suck show for David. You know? So, and I think it may be, I don't know if I can give him the credit for this, but I think maybe Max may be written so thinly so that we're not so attached to him ourselves when she goes back and saves him and completely undoes any relationship they do have.
I think you're right, because there's I think it's very intentional, because there's a few little clues. Because when her best friend Morris talks about him, he says he's like, you know, Max was a really nice guy, but he kind of shits on his music. And he says something about how she's like, you know, been essentially subsumed by him, not just in the grief, but also made it sound kind of like their life together when they were together, like, because she never got her career going. And so yeah, so that I think you're onto something, Dave.
Yeah, so I spent so much time trying to unpack that, like while the movie's going on, that I was like, now I didn't know that she was gonna. I you know how I always guess the ending of every movie. I didn't think that it would actually go down the road of she's gonna undo her relationship. But then when I started piecing it together, like afterward, I'm like, actually, it really kind of makes sense the way it's put together. The question I have is whether she and David have a deep enough connection on screen. And I guess they do. But, you know, if the thing that sort of brought them together was their separate grieving, what's going to bring them together? Roxy Music, I guess, is still going to be the thing that brings them together, which there are worse bands, I guess, to have in common with your partner than Roxy Music. Not many, but there are worse bands. I mean,
yeah, I wonder too if he in this timeline will have lost his parents or not. Like,
I was wondering that too,
because you know, ultimately it takes a page from the Butterfly Effect when she basically like she doesn't go back and kill herself, you know, in the womb, but she does go back and like prevent them from meeting in the first place. So I'm wondering if that is one of the ripple effects, is that his parents are still alive. So maybe they don't, like you said, they don't bond over grief. They bond over music or something else. or they just think they're both really good looking. Which it seemed like even when they saw each other in the antique store, they had like kind of a little,
Yeah.
how you doing kind of moment.
I think it was, I mean, I can see that. I think it was more that like she remembered that she had seen him before somewhere. But he is cute. So I guess there's that. The other thing about this is, you know, we learn definitively that she meets Max at that festival and then lets him go. She doesn't continue on with him like she does when she met him the first time. And I think that I like movies that have ambiguous endings generally, but I think this might have done a little better if they had just even spoken one line to each other each after they bump shoulders or whatever. Because it just seemed a little bit too precious to be like, see what I did? You know, and it's like, yes, I see what you did. Fucking give me some more meat or vegan meat. Give me some more tofu.
Thank you.
The first thing that give me some more satay.
More sustenance.
So I like this overall, but I think the thing that is really kind of blowing my mind is I didn't really connect with it emotionally. I was just sitting there thinking like, yeah, well, this could happen. And you know, which is not usually how I react to movies. I usually react to them from the gut and then think about them afterward. So, and this, I kind of did the opposite.
Interesting.
By the way, speaking of Justin H. Min as being a douchebag in Shortcomings and not being a douchebag in this, he's in 3 scenes with his sister in this movie. And the first scene he's with his sister, he's a total D-bag.
Is he?
I mean,
I don't know that he's a D-bag.
How is he a total D-bag to his sister?
You know, just the way he's kind of like, you're closing up the shop tonight. No, we're not selling the store. He's not a D-bag. But it's kind of like, I can see that characterization from Shortcomings in him a little bit.
I see. I was just thinking she was.
I think that too.
So he's like,
he's
kind of asserting.
Yeah, I got the impression that he was like the older, responsible one, and she was the younger, like whatever kind of, you know.
Yeah. Although I do love that she's like, when he says that he met somebody, I like that she's like, oh God, don't do the wounded bird routine again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she got a zinger in. I liked that. But you know, the one thing I will say is I like that we get a little bit of development on his sister. You know, we get a little teeny tiny bit about his parents. We don't get a lot about Max, and I agree with you, Dave. I think I hadn't thought about it so much before, but I think you're right. I like your reasoning and rationale as to why. But I will say the one thing that kind of made me sad was Morris. I wanted more of Morris. We don't get a lot about him, and I just feel like he's kind of like the gay best friend, like, and kind of like, this is not a rom-com, but it's a very, you know, common trope in the rom-coms and genre. And I don't know, I kind of wanted more of him, but
I did too. I thought that he got the short shrift, but he has a partner in the new timeline at the end, which he did not in the current one.
I got to go back and rewatch it. I missed that.
Yeah, there was definitely like a hug exchange.
Yes.
Like, this is, Yes,
you're right. You're right. Well, that's a good touch. I guess the new timeline is better for everybody.
Seems like it.
Well, it's like maybe this was how it was. This was the right timeline. Maybe the other timeline was the bad timeline, and this one was the right one because she gets to fulfill her career too.
This is
because when you see
timeline.
Max, he's not like forlorn, like he can't believe. He's happy.
No, he's
with
happy.
Whomever that woman is. Right. Yeah,
and not dead. Although who knows?
Dead.
He could still die for all we know. Like he could just be that he was always meant to die,
right?
And then in this timeline, just happens a different way.
Yeah,
could be. That could be. Who
Still
knows?
had to go get that fucking chair.
I know. Was this chair really that amazing?
It must have been. Good Lord. I also did like the scene with David's parents, how it did, without being overly saccharine, it did very quickly show you how much the two of them loved each other.
I liked that too.
So I think a lot of this is really well done. I just, I think that if I watched it again and didn't sit there thinking about have all the gears turning like I did the first time, I would enjoy it a lot more. And not that I didn't enjoy it. I don't want to make it sound like I didn't. I'm kind of knowing myself the way I do. I'm kind of like, how the fuck didn't you cry at this movie? This movie is fucking made to be a tearjerker. What's wrong with you? So.
Yeah, it hit me in a lot of very personal ways, even though and I say that I have never had a partner die. So not in that way, but like it kind of had me reevaluating like every single romantic relationship I've ever had and how so many of them were awful or toxic. And I'm like, I want to love like that. Like, anyway, like, so yeah, it had me very, very self-reflective. And in addition or in conjunction with the very, very tragic story being told on screen. So yeah, I was very weepy.
You know how, Megan, that you and I, but you in particular,
Yeah.
do not watch trailers and you
Oh.
don't read
I do
press
not.
notes until after you've seen the movie.
Yes, that's true.
I had only heard of this movie by the title, and I knew that Lucy Boynton was in it. So when I started it, I thought it was a rom-com. And then I was like, this is a fucking dark way to start a rom-com. Jesus.
Spoiler
Yeah, I
alert.
thought it was too. And then I think Shauna was like, this is not a rom-com. And I was like,
No,
no,
it sure
it's
isn't.
not. I was wrong.
It's kind of like if Nick Hornby took writing seriously. That's kind of how I feel about this.
Mm. You know what's
Dave,
funny?
I have to say, I love how you're always like shots fired and like randoms are getting stray bullets.
Doesn't
I
this
love
feel
it.
like a
It's-
Nick Hornby story, but like serious? Yeah.
It does. It made me
Yes!
think about
but it's still hilarious.
God, what the
to
fuck
me.
is that movie? High Fidelity. In the
Oh,
way that this
yes.
movie made me want to take out my record player and set it up, and all my records and things have been sitting in boxes for almost a year now, and I'm like, I gotta get this shit set
Evan,
up.
get
Yeah.
that out. Get that out. Speaking of the music, I will say one of the parts that made me weep is the film's usage. By the way, really good soundtrack, but great usage of
Dope
songs
use
too.
of songs. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
that song, the Lana Del Rey song, "Say Yes to Heaven," it's a great song, but it's never made me cry like it did in this film. I was like inconsolable when I was listening to it in this film. I was
man.
like,
Yeah.
But that is a great song. And, you know, I like, I'm Like a Bird. That's not even a song I really love, but it works well in this film. And
Mhm.
Yeah.
I like
Pump
the
Up the
Phoebe
Jam.
Bridge, Pump Up the Jam. I like Phoebe Bridgers does a rendition of something now. I can't remember what it is, but
I really like the Nikki and the Dove song a lot, which I had heard before, but something about playing it on the radio. Anyway, it's used for one of those emotional moments too.
Yep.
Nice.
Although I have to say, my favorite moment is when the Cars for Kids song
I
gets
knew
her.
it. I knew it.
I was like, I respect the movie for going here, for picking a fucking earworm song that's obnoxious that knocks her back in time the first time. I have a hard time believing that was the first, because she said, I've traveled back to the first time we both heard these songs together. I have a hard time believing that was the first Cars for Kids, but hey, you know.
Well, maybe that was the first time they heard it together.
Yeah, suppose.
I should mention before people like started talking about Cars for Kids again a couple years ago as like a funny kind of thing. I had never heard that before, ever. Never.
Really?
So
I hadn't
that
heard
song.
it.
so it's possible, yeah.
I hadn't heard it until you guys were talking about it.
Cars for Kids.
So there we
I'm
are.
not going to say
No, I don't know it well enough to sing it. So
Evan, you know it.
Yes, I
does
do.
anybody have
There's a billboard for it around here somewhere too, and it gets in my head every
Oh,
freaking
God.
time I drive by it.
Oh no.
does anybody have any closing thoughts on the greatest hits?
I don't think so. Just that I really liked this. This was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend it,
It
too,
was.
but maybe get out of your own head while you're watching it.
Don't have an existential crisis like I
Yeah.
did. Or maybe
Or-
do.
yeah.
Maybe you're in need of an existential crisis. Who knows?
Maybe. I've certainly had a few of those. Well, anyway, that brings us to the end.
Now it's therapy. Spoiler piece.
Spoiler
therapy.
piece therapy theater. Spoiler piece therapy theater. That'd be interesting. Anyway,
It would.
well, I cannot not recommend Civil War, but I can kind of not recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, I know we use this a lot. It's overused, but I don't care. I think it's apropos. I think your mileage may vary. I mean,
Yeah.
it's brutal. It's horrifying. It's disturbing. I will say I like a war movie that is entrenched in anti-war messaging. And this is that, even though there are issues. But also, I wanted to sing, made me think of Guns N' Roses, I Don't Need Your Civil War. But anyway.
Yeah.
I don't need your Civil War. Anyway.
And then it sounds like we would all recommend the greatest hits.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you to our editor, Otto Clammer, for being a great editor and making us sound great each week. Thank you, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
Thanks, Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. If you want to go to our website, we're spoilerpiece.com. On social media, we're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook, and we're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Threads. If you would like to get in touch with us and tell me just how terrible my reaction to Civil War is, you can email us at spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can leave us an angry voicemail.
At 86221-PEACE.
Don't leave an angry voicemail. Just leave a nice, sedate, calm, reasonable voicemail. If you like the show, please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. You can also rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That really does us big favors, gets the word out about the show, Yahoo. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. This week, we talk about James Cameron's The Abyss in honor of its 35th anniversary. And that's it. My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, not Charlotte. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads. Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can find me on social media as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And my name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast. I too am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at OpinionS World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.